Food guilt is exhausting to live with. And I know this all too well. It makes it hard to enjoy eating anything because if you're listening to this podcast, chances are that you know that to have a healthy relationship with food, restriction cannot be in the picture. But then when you try to eat something that you love, you are consumed by this guilt that makes it hard to enjoy. And so you might be thinking, how can I finally get rid of this guilt once and for all? That's what we're talking about in this episode. We are going to explore the complex world of food guilt and talk about the secret to overcoming it once and for all. And this is something that most people do not talk about. So let's get right into it. Welcome to the Live Unrestricted podcast, a show where you'll learn how to heal your relationship with food and your body so that you can focus your time and energy on more important things like your personal growth. I'm your host, Sabrina Magna, food freedom coach, and my mission is to help make your life happier and healthier without stress, overwhelm, or guilt about food. If you love the show, please do go out and share it. And if you're looking for support with your relationship with food, details about my programs are in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's jump in. Hi, my friend. Thank you so much for pressing play. Again, I'm so happy that you're here. And I've got to tell you, I have been obsessed with my podcasts lately. Just like every time I go to sit down to record these podcast episodes, I'm so lit up. I have so much to say and I'm just diving deep. Like every Thursday is my podcast recording day now. And I am so excited to dive into food guilt because after like really sitting down with it, I realize how misunderstood this is. And if you have never truly experienced that like debilitating sense that you're doing something wrong, it's really tough to know how to get rid of it. So in this episode, we're going to talk about where this food guilt comes from because it's really hard to heal something that you do not understand. And so this is something that I always repeat to my clients as well is if you want to heal something for good, you need to understand what is driving it, where it's coming from. And this is something that runs deep. So we're going to get into that. And then I'm actually going to take you through a process to dismantle food guilt, something that you can use and take with you and keep applying to yourself so that whenever you notice that sneaky little feeling come up when you're trying to eat a cookie or you're trying to have bread and eat like a normal person, you can use this process. Now, before we get into it, I just want to say my boobs are so sore. Like it's super distracting. I got my period yesterday and I don't know if anyone else experiences this when they have their period. Their boobs are just so sore and sensitive. So it's very distracting, but we're going to get through this. All right. So before we jump in, I do not want to forget to share this with you because I literally created this for you. I am on a creation path right now that I just want to help. And I want to create resources that are going to be valuable and serve you. And so I created a new resource because I know that you need it all around trigger foods. So if you're someone who you have this whole list of foods that once you start eating them, you feel completely out of control. And it's like the second you start eating, you cannot stop until the entire bag or box or plate is gone. Then this is going to be really, really helpful for you because a big problem, a mistake that I see women making is they want to eat normally. They want to be able to have the cookies and the chips, but they just decide I'm going to go to the grocery store and I'm just going to have the foods. I'm just going to bring these foods back into my life. And then they end up binging and thinking, see, I can't control myself. I need to restrict. I need to have these food rules because when I don't, then I completely binge. I feel even worse and I don't want to live this way. So I actually have a step-by-step process that I take my clients through inside of Food Freedom Academy to bring back their trigger foods into their lives, but to do it in a very progressive and systematic way. I'm a big structure girl. If you know me, I love organization. I love structure. And that's why the Food Freedom Academy is very much structured in a way that we're not just throwing you into the deep end and like bringing all of these foods back at once and then having you be completely out of control. It's a very step-by-step way. And so I wanted to share one of my processes with you, one of my resources. And this is the 8-step guide to eat your trigger foods without losing control. So if you would like to have access completely free, all you got to do is go to sabrinamagnan.com/trigger food, all in one word. And I'm also going to leave that link in the show notes for you, but that's sabrinamagnan.com/trigger food. And that's where you're going to be able to access this free guide. All right, let's get into the topic of food guilt. So as I said at the beginning of this episode, it is really hard to heal and overcome something that you do not understand. Like most of the things that I struggle with, I sit down and I deconstruct it in my mind. I go deep. I try to understand, where is this coming from? What's happening? What am I believing? What is this doing for me? Because again, I'm going to repeat this time and time again. And I just want to say, I love when people are like coming in my DMs on Instagram or sending me emails about how much they're learning about the nervous system. It makes me so happy to hear you using this language, because at the end of the day, almost everything does come down to your nervous system, and understanding that this guilt is actually doing something for you. And I know that it doesn't feel that way, but if you have been having a really hard time getting rid of this guilt for good, it's because there is a secondary perceived benefit to holding on to this guilt. And I know what you might be thinking right now, Sabrina, I am not holding on to this guilt. I actually am trying to do everything in my power to let go of it. It is just this persistent thing that keeps coming back over and over again. And I understand that none of us are willingly holding on to guilt, willingly holding on to anxiety or perfectionism. These are things that there's a part of us that is sticking straight to it because it feels like it's protecting us from something. And if the thought of letting go of the guilt or the anxiety or the shame is associated with something that is dangerous, like weight gain or losing friends or losing people that you love or feeling a lot of shame and judgment and isolation, then we are going to hold on to the things that we perceive to be protecting us. So when you ask yourself the question, where does the guilt come from? Things like, I shouldn't be eating this might come up. And most people don't question that. They don't dive deeper. They don't ask themselves, why? Is this true that I shouldn't be eating this? Where is this coming from? But that's not what we do here. We dive deeper. And so I want you to ask yourself, when you have that thought of, I shouldn't be eating this, what comes up as to why? It might be because it's bad for me. It might be because it's going to make me gain weight, or it might be I'm already in a bigger body, and so I shouldn't be eating something quote unquote unhealthy because I'm already overweight or I'm already unhealthy. And so I'm just making things worse. And notice how 99% of the time it is associated with our weight. And so notice that the guilt is there to hopefully make us stop eating. right? When we're eating the cookie or we're eating the chips or we're eating the candy and we're consumed by guilt, it's usually as a hope that if I feel guilty, then I'm going to make better choices, right? If I feel guilty, then I'm not going to do the thing that I think is bad for me. So the guilt is acting as a way to hopefully get us to make better choices. But the thing is that you and I both know that having that guilt does not usually lead to better choices. Actually, having that guilt has really negative consequences because it can lead you to have that all or nothing mentality. Now you feel guilty because you've quote unquote done something wrong. And so you think, well, I've already done something bad today, so might as well just like have a bad day and then be good tomorrow. So guilt leads to shame. I'm bad for eating that, which then triggers more eating, more binging. And so this is really important because we need to start deconstructing this in our mind and to understand why things that we subconsciously think are helping us are actually making us get further away from whatever goal that is. Maybe your goal is to lose weight. Maybe your goal is to get healthier or to make better choices or to eat intuitively. I have yet to meet someone who's like, I am so glad that I am consumed by guilt because it helps me so much. Because the reality is that what guilt does is it creates emotional distress, right? When you feel guilt, what tends to happen? Your heart rate increases. You start to think more quickly. You start to get really, really hard on yourself. You speak negatively to yourself. You criticize. And that is perceived as dangerous for your nervous system, right? If you imagine that there is someone behind you as you're trying to get some work done, and that person behind you is like, you suck. You're terrible at this. You can't do anything right. Do you think that you're going to be able to think really clearly and be in a good mood and be productive? No, you're going to get super stressed and you're going to get really hard on yourself and you're going to start to think really quickly and you're going to get dysregulated. So that's what happens when you're consumed by guilt, is that you're actually getting in a dysregulated state. And if you've listened to any of my podcasts in the past, and if you've ever been dysregulated in your life, which is every single human on this planet, then you likely know that when you are in this anxious, dysregulated state, it is really hard to think clearly, and it is really hard to think long term. Right? You are in this fast-paced state and you want to feel better now. And what typically happens is if you're someone who feels guilt around food, you also likely have the profile of someone who struggles to self-regulate. Therefore, you use food to self-regulate. So now you started eating. That led to guilt. The guilt led to dysregulation. The dysregulation led to eating more in order to try to self-soothe. And then there's more guilt. And then the cycle just gets worse and worse and feeds into one another. And then before you know it, you've overeaten. You feel like crap. You have even more guilt. And it is a mess. And so the first place that we really want to get clear on is how much the guilt is not serving us. We subconsciously think that if I feel guilty and if I feel shame, then I'm going to make better choices. There is so much research that shows that shame is not a good motivator for long-term change, because then your self-esteem drops. You are hard on yourself. You tell yourself that you can't do anything right. That gets hardwired in your brain. And now you see yourself as someone who can't do anything right, who cannot change. And if that is your belief on yourself, then chances are anytime you do try to change, you're going to fall back into your old patterns because you believe that you can't. Now, another way that guilt is not serving you is that it disconnects you from your body. When you're eating and you're caught in guilt, you shift from body awareness, from being able to listen to the cues of your body, from being present, from being mindful, and you shift towards judgment and criticism. You go from being in your body to being in your head. So instead of listening to hunger, to fullness, to satisfaction cues, you're stuck analyzing what you quote unquote should or shouldn't have eaten. And this disconnection blocks your ability to learn what your body actually needs next. This goes back to when you go from being in a regulated state to a dysregulated state, you go from being present in your body to being caught up in overthinking in your mind. And another way that guilt is not serving you is that it often leads to overcompensation, right? You feel bad about what you've eaten or how much you've eaten. So what can happen after is that you start skipping meals, cutting calories, or swearing to quote unquote be good tomorrow. And then those restrictions cause physical and psychological deprivation, which then triggers the next binge. So guilt becomes the emotional glue that holds this cycle together. I'm going to go through 2 more ways that the guilt is not serving you. And if you're thinking, I get it, Sabrina, I understand the guilt is not good for me, I'm spending time here because if your subconscious mind is not on board with letting go of the guilt, if your subconscious mind still thinks that the guilt is serving you, then you will not be able to let it go. So what we need to do is we need to get really clear on all of the reasons that this is not serving you, that this is actually creating negative consequences in your life. Because people will only change when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And if you haven't let go of the guilt yet, it's because your subconscious mind has associated more pain with letting go of the guilt than to holding on to it. And so we have to really deconstruct this. But another one is that it keeps food charged with power. It keeps food on a pedestal. And what I mean by that is that every time that you label a food choice as quote unquote bad, you strengthen the belief that certain foods are dangerous or they're morally wrong. And this creates obsession, it creates cravings, it creates anxiety around those foods. It put those foods on a pedestal. Quote unquote bad foods are up here, and then quote unquote healthy foods are down here. And neutralizing the guilt actually helps to normalize those foods. And when you normalize those foods, they don't have power over you. They're not these things that are so out of reach, that are so off limits. And that is how you're going to be able to eat them without fear and also to eat them without losing control. And then the last thing that guilt is doing in a way that it does not serve you is that it blocks curiosity and it actually blocks your growth. It blocks your healing because feeling guilty shuts down your ability to learn from an experience. Every experience is either going to give you the result that you want or the lesson that you needed. I'm going to repeat this, and I really recommend that you write this down because this is going to serve you in your healing journey. Every experience is either going to give you the result that you want or the lesson that you needed. So let's say I'm working with a client and we are reintroducing a fear food like candy. Well, if she goes through the 8-step process to reintroduce that food and it turns into overeating, then that's not the result that she wanted. But there is always, always, always a lesson within it because everything is data. And I am like, there is no doubt in my mind that every single person is capable of eating their fear foods without losing control, without overeating. And so if something happened that led to a binge, that led to overeating, then there is something to learn from that experience. So when you're consumed by guilt, instead of asking what was going on for me there, what was there for me to learn, instead you spiral into self-blame. You spiral into what's wrong with me. I can't do anything right. And that obviously does not serve you. So curiosity, for example, was I tired? Was I stressed? Was I dysregulated? Was I undernourished? Was I disconnected? Is what helps you make lasting changes, not punishment, not self-blame. So I told you about a little exercise I was going to give for you to do. This is what I want you to do. I want you to take out a pen and a piece of paper. And I love to get Instagram DMs from people who are like, every time you tell us to do an exercise or to journal on something, I actually do it. And I actually change because of it. That makes me so happy. So please, if you are not driving, take out something that you can write on. You're going to answer this question. What do I feel like food guilt is doing for me? So this is going to help you flush out the secondary benefits. So it might be, if I feel guilty, then I'll make better choices and I'm going to lose weight or whatever comes up. Like really allow yourself to not think and just to write down, what do I feel like the food guilt is doing for me? So if I think of my own example, which is guilt that I feel when I'm not doing anything, then I might write down, I feel like if I continue to have the guilt for just sitting down and watching TV, then I won't do that as much and I'll be more productive and I'll get more things done and I'll be more successful and blah, 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 blah. You want to follow that thread because you're going to see that there's a part of you that feels like the guilt is serving you in some way. But then you're going to answer this second question, which is, what is food guilt actually doing for me? What are the negative consequences of the food guilt? And write as long as you need. And doing this exercise, what you're going to do is you're actually going to start to recognize that the pain of holding on to the food guilt is greater than the pain of letting it go. And it's only then that your nervous system will feel safe enough to start to let it go. Until then, it's going to feel like it's doing something for you. It's protecting you. And so it won't be able to let it go. And once you recognize that the pain of holding on to the food guilt is greater than the pain of letting it go, the third question that you're going to journal on is, what are the positive things that might happen once I let go of the food guilt? Because we are so caught up in the worst case scenario. This is us as humans. This is what I was talking about with one of my one-on-one clients this week. How we are wired, we have a negativity bias. So we are wired for the worst case scenario. And so we instinctually think about, oh my God, if I don't feel guilty for eating this, then I'm going to eat 5 cookies and I'm going to gain 20 pounds and people are going to leave me. Like we really, really go down that negative spiral and we never think about what is the best case scenario. We really have to wire our brains to start thinking that way. This has been a process for me because we are biologically designed as a way to survive, to focus on the worst case scenario. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can teach your brain to think differently. And that's what I always try to explain to anyone who joins the Food Freedom Academy and thinks that it's just about food. Like, no, girl, we are rewiring your brain to think differently. And when you think differently around food, you think differently around your body, around exercise, around relationships, around every aspect of your life, because the way you do one thing is the way you do most things. And so you have to learn how to wire your mind to look for something different and to have a different perspective. So think about, what is the best case scenario? What can actually happen when you let go of food guilt? And I'm going to walk you through what are some of the things that will happen, because this is what I experienced in my life. I feel zero guilt whenever I eat any kind of food. And this is what my clients get to experience as well. So the first thing that's going to happen when you let go of food guilt is that you start to feel calm, not chaotic. Without guilt running the show, your nervous system can finally relax. You're no longer in that all or nothing state where you eat fast, you feel chaotic, you're disconnected, and you're panicked because you feel like you're doing something wrong. And you and I both know that when you're in that panic state, chances are you're going to eat more, not less. So when you feel safe around food, you naturally eat slower, you taste more, and you stop when you've had enough. Not because you forced yourself to, but because your body's signals actually become clear again. So when you can let go of that guilt, you are more likely to eat less, not to eat more. The second thing that will happen is that food loses its power over you. When guilt leaves your body, the forbidden nature of food, it disappears too. It's no longer this special off-limit thing that you have to binge on before it's gone. You realize that you can have one cookie today, you can have one cookie tomorrow and the next day. So there's no urgency to overeat it right now. That's when you start having a few bites and moving on naturally. This is exactly what happened to one of our members inside of FFA. She shared a win this week that she went out to eat. She said, I went out to eat this week and I felt my fullness before even 1/3 of my meal was eaten. And I even ordered food that was quote unquote not allowed on previous diets. I didn't feel guilty for eating it. This experience has taught me that I can enjoy food and not feel the need to eat it all because I can always order it again. I didn't feel like I sabotaged anything and actually felt great afterwards. And then she added, and I love this so much, I'm teaching my inner child that she's okay and can be fearless in the face of good food. So actually, letting go of the guilt means that food loses its power over you. And then the last thing, I mean, I could go on for hours, but the last thing that you can expect is when the food guilt leaves the picture, you reconnect with satisfaction. And this is huge because you get to experience food as it was meant to be: pleasurable, satisfying, nourishing. And that satisfaction signals your brain that the experience is complete, which actually reduces the desire to keep eating. One of the trainings that we have inside of FFA is on the difference between being full and being satisfied. And an analogy that I use is that we have two tanks. We have one tank for hunger, or one tank for fullness, should I say, and one tank for satisfaction. And often what people do, especially dieters, is that they fill the fullness tank, which means they've eaten to a point that their body has had enough. But their satisfaction tank is not full. Maybe it's because they're eating something that isn't satisfying, like they were craving a sandwich, but they ended up having like a disgusting salad, so they're not satisfied. Or it's because they're so out of their body, they're so disconnected or filled with guilt and shame that they're not actually feeling satisfied from the experience. And so when you can fill that satisfaction tank, you start to notice when something truly hits the spot versus when you're just eating to fill an emotional void. So there is such an importance that we need to put on feeling satisfied at the end of an eating experience. Another really good example is I notice that if I make myself a small bowl of pretzels, I have these like honey mustard pretzels at home that I'm obsessed with right now. They are so yummy. If I make a small bowl of these honey mustard pretzels and I sit and I enjoy every bite and I'm really present and I've only got a small bowl, right? And every pretzel is really special and I'm savoring it, I am a lot more satisfied at the end of that than if I were to sit down with the entire bag of pretzels and I'm just eating it as a way to eat quantity instead of quality. Now, I'm not saying that if after having the small bowl, I want more, I don't allow myself to go for more. Absolutely not. But there is a huge difference in feeling full and feeling satisfied. So I hope that this episode gave you a different way of looking at food guilt, because maybe you've followed accounts or listened to podcast episodes that tell you like, just don't feel guilty about it. Just don't feel guilty. And that can feel like extremely frustrating advice because that is obvious, but it's also not helpful because that's like a conscious thing. Like, just don't feel guilty. It's the same as telling someone, just don't be anxious. Like, it's like, okay, thank you. We have to go deeper than that because there's a reason why the guilt is wired in your body and in your nervous system. So in this episode, we really looked at why there is a part of you that feels like the guilt is serving you. And then we also had to start deconstructing what is the guilt actually doing for you and how is it maybe negatively impacting how you feel and your eating habits. And then once we've done that, we can look at what's the most likely thing that will happen when you let go of the guilt. And the answer to that is that you are going to start feeling more calm. You're going to start feeling less chaotic, more satisfied. Food is going to lose its power over you. It's not going to feel like this thing that is constantly on your mind that is off limits. It's just going to be neutral. And it's once it's neutral that you can eat it without fear, without turning into this like anxious, panicked mess. And you can listen to your body more. You can stop after a few bites. And that is your path to quote unquote normal eating. If this episode was helpful for you, you know the drill. Send it to someone that you love, or if you have these like online forums where people are asking questions about how to overcome food guilt, this is a great place to send them because we need to start going underneath the surface and diving into where this guilt is coming from so that we can transmute it and turn it into peace. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you would like to know how to work with me inside of Food Freedom Academy, you can find the link in the show notes at sabrinamagna.com/FFA. I love you so much, and I will see you in the next episode. Hey, real quick before you go, if you're loving this podcast and you're thinking, Sabrina, I want more. I want to go deeper. I want a step-by-step process for healing my relationship with food. I've got a free workshop that literally walks you through it. It's a full breakdown of the exact method that I use to help my clients stop binging, heal emotional eating, and finally feel at peace with food and their bodies. It's totally free. So if you're ready to stop feeling obsessed and out of control with food, head to sabrinamagnan.com/training or find the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magnan Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.